So I'd like to introduce to you the two presenters for this. The first gentleman is Bill McMillan. Bill is based out of Castlegar. Bill is a seasoned water and wastewater operator in water distribution for wastewater collections MU1, WWT2, and WT2. Certified backflow inspector, chlorine handling ticket, and a busy circuit rider servicing First Nation communities across British Columbia. The second presenter is Sean Bouchard. He has over 20 years worked with management, maintenance, and operational personnel to engineer, control, and power systems and deploy secure network solutions. He leads the team at ICI Electrical Engineering to develop comprehensive solutions to industrial, cybersecurity, and electrical engineering for municipal, mining, and industrial sectors. In pursuit of an optimal work-life balance, he and his wife and their 3 children are located in Kamloops, BC, which abounds with many opportunities to enjoy the great outdoors as a family. So I welcome Sean. I believe you're going to be starting out.
Thank you again, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sean Bouchard, and I have Bill McMillan with me.
Hi there.
Bill is calling in remotely here. He had to run up north and work with some clients up there. So thanks for fitting this into your day, Bill.
Oh, no problem.
So I know the title of this presentation is quite the mouthful. We have ISA, we got some slashes in there, but basically 62443 is a standard that's been developed, and we're going to walk through how it applies to water, wastewater, and operators in general. So as we already got an intro for each other here, Bill, you want to add anything else?
No, not really. It's just want to do my part here and help out.
Well, thank you. And that's me right there. It's not the picture today. It's not live. Just through this slide in here, there's a presentation activity. So after the presentation, there's a crossword puzzle we have that features all these crazy words and acronyms that we're going to be covering in this presentation. So feel free to download it. We'll see if we can get it over to EOCP for distribution in the slide package, as well as our website there, and the answer key, of course. So jumping into cybersecurity in BC, there's a whole bunch of, it's bureaucratic. There's a lot of documentation. There's a lot of regulations that apply, specifically for water, wastewater operators. You guys are in the public sector, so just be aware of any privacy acts that may apply to you. In general, there is the National Cybersecurity Strategy. So that's part of Public Safety Canada. And there's also cyber.gc.ca. So those are great resources. If you want more information on a lot of things covered today, in general, cybersecurity and what you can do, and some action plans too. Public safety is great at working with municipalities and public sector for things like disaster recovery plans. And I know they're sharing and combining a lot of municipal plans together so that they can help build better plans. And so again, the links are there. Feel free to reach out. If you need additional contacts, let Bill or I know, and we can get you in touch. If you do have to report an incident and you haven't been able to stay out of the news, then there's a link there for that. And if you need to get insurance involved, of course, you're probably going to have RCMP at some point. They actually do now have a cybersecurity division with some extremely experienced professionals working for them. So just a quick recap from yesterday for anyone who missed the cybersecurity penetration demonstration that Rob and Darren did from ICI. So they covered these myths during their presentation and showed what happens if, as a demonstration, if a water treatment plant gets hacked, and what it looks like from the hacker's perspective and what it looks like from the operator's perspective. So we're taking this a step further. Now we're going to look at the regulations behind it, things you can do, things you can just help to make yourself not the lowest hanging fruit here. And if you want more, again, we'll make the slide presentation available. When you're looking at cybersecurity and you're looking at who's going to be hacking an industrial automation and control system, or an IACS, you have basically two groups. You have insiders and you have outsiders. Now, on insiders, it's very similar to some IT principles. I mean, you have malicious intent and you have accidental intent. And we're going to look into, how that accidental intent can be reduced and worked on, because that's actually the majority of these issues. They arise from, not malicious or threat actors. A lot of time they happen because of accidents. People access things they probably shouldn't be. Outsiders, well, there's a whole category of those that we can go. It goes, threat actors vary all the way from script kiddies who get some stuff off Google. They can download some scripts and find, vulnerabilities, to nation state sponsored groups. And the protection against all these things is based upon, what your acceptable level of threat is. And that has to be determined during your cybersecurity risk analysis, or any of those other systems and methodologies you're using to figure out what level of protection you're actually looking for. Hackers, and like most people, want to get the maximum gain from the least amount of effort. So, they're looking for things that are easy to hit. They're looking for, if their target's difficult and they're not specifically focused on you, they're probably just going to move on. They might not even have been targeting a water plant in the first place, or wastewater treatment facility. They're just looking for something to do, or they're maybe just, it was an automated system, through Shodan.io that Rob demonstrated. And you could just find systems automatically, and it just notifies you that there's a vulnerability here and they're using default passwords. So let's see what we can do. So ISA IEC 62443 standard. So this standard was actually, so it's ISA, which is international. And then when it gets adopted to North America, we see IEC get involved to help normalize it when necessary. This is actually an informative standard, which means it does not use terms such as shall or shall not. It's not prescribed or officially required in BC or really anywhere in Canada right now. The whole system of these cybersecurity standards is very new, and we're talking 10 years. It was about 10 years, I maybe a little bit more, that they started working on these standards, addressing, and even some of them are still in technical review stage. They haven't even been released yet, certain components. It's that new. And it's something that's come about because we want to get everything connected. And when these systems were initially designed 20, 30 years ago, they were just hoping to connect them. All they really wanted to do was have a water plant talk with a SCADA system, or a water plant talk with a reservoir, or wastewater forward some energy information back to hydro. You weren't looking at the security yet because you were just trying to get it talking. So now that everything's connected, now that everyone wants Ethernet on everything, now that everyone wants to use their phone to connect to stuff, we really need to look at all those things that make that happen. So our first step here, IT and OT. So it's information technology and operational technology. Basically, they work in parallel. They're not subsets of each other. So operational technology needs to work with IT, and IT needs to work with OT. If you take our operational technology, PLCs, HMIs, things like that, if you want to try and fit those into IT rules, it's basically like trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. You can make it fit by making the hole bigger, but then you have all the gaps around that's round peg. And that's what happens when you try and take generic policies and dump it on the custom applications. It works, but what are you leaving vulnerable? So again, just confirming this ITOT and putting some words to it. IT's main tenet is confidentiality of information. They're protecting credit card numbers. They're protecting access to emails, chat messages, hopefully, protection on Zoom calls, that type of thing. So that's the tenets of IT departments. Now, when you move into OT, you're looking at availability. You want to have things online. This process needs to run. This factory needs to be running all the time. This wastewater plant can't just shut down because they need to do a Windows update. So your availability is key, and the other tenants become less of a priority. You also introduce a whole bunch of new risks. So, in IT, you're looking at, credit cards. That's financial, that's money, information loss. When you move into OT systems, you're talking about HSE, health, safety, environment, in addition to your process, in addition to keeping things running. So there's different priorities. And that's why I mean that, one can't be a subset of another. They have to work hand in hand. And lastly, on the slide here, we got lifespan. So, I mean, who here is using a computer that's 20 years old right now to watch this webinar? I highly doubt anyone is using a 20-year-old computer at this moment running modern Windows. It's just not in the life cycle of IT. You got 3 to 5 years. You know, once you hit that 3 to 5 year mark, you're looking to change out that equipment, get some new computers going, get some software updated. OT, you know, you're talking wastewater facilities, you're talking process systems that are designed and engineered around a very tight set of protocols, a very tight requirement, and you're talking 20 years. You know, you have processors in there, they hit 20 years, then let's look at changing them out now. We got some new systems running. We got some new improvements we want to make, but you're not going to be changing your PLCs in your water plant or wastewater plant every 3 years. Like it's a different life cycle. Pitfalls, and I'm surprising Bill with this one because I just threw this one in based on our discussions last night.
Fair enough.
So, as you know, it's not, you know, running with a new thing, kind of rolling something new out. You got to learn from failures. Just like Adam Creek mentioned yesterday, it's the courage to keep going that is critical in light of failure. But when you're looking at something like this, it's also essential that you learn and improve with every iteration. And you know, that's where we need to look at this pitfalls and how we use continuous improvement to continue to update these standards and update any of the policies or any training that's being developed as a point in it. You need to make sure the correct stakeholders are involved at all phases of a project, especially with cybersecurity rolling out new things, learning about new things, because when you have key stakeholders involved, they see your problems, they see, you know, what you're stuck on, and they can help you obviously get budget allocated, because, you know, it's great if you find something that you want to do, but if you don't have a budget, you can't implement anything. So make sure you get key stakeholders involved. Training. I mean, we need to train people on whatever's developed. You need to train people on everything from running process to learning new policies and procedures. And, you know, we want to make sure that even though the training for operational systems in SCADA and operational technology involves health, safety, environment, HSE, you want to make sure you don't necessarily combine them in the same training video or same training course or however you're presenting this, because you'll lead to kind of a lot of friction in trying to develop this culture of safety and culture of cybersecurity awareness, if I want to deem it that way. Documentation. So I'm sure Bill, going around to all these different water plants, it's, you know, when you come to a plant that's new, you need documentation. You need to see what's being recorded. You need to submit to ministry. If you didn't write it down, you didn't do it. So extremely important to get documentation in order. And lastly here, just the addressing a component. You want to make sure, you know, there's a lot of shiny things out there. There's things that, you know, interest you. Maybe one point of our discussion interests you, but not the other. But you have to be careful when you're looking at these systems. They're systems as a whole. Yeah, I mean, if you fix one part, it might be okay, but you need to look at the whole picture and evaluate where the threats could come from, what your tolerable risk is, and how the system all works together. Because, you know, someone might be, you know, maybe their job is working on this particular system here, and they think that's the most important one, whereas someone else over here thinks this one's the most important one. So we need to evaluate those things as a whole to figure out the best way to put resources to work. So jumping into our defense in depth section, sounds pretty fancy. It even has an acronym with a lowercase I, so it means business. So our process and kind of how we're going to go through this here, I'm going to be discussing the 7 main points behind defense in depth, and Bill has some real life situations where he's going to place us into and work through and see how these things apply to operators and what he's encountered, and how we can make little improvements today as we work toward getting a risk assessment and identifying, you know, where you're at and all that. So there's little things you can do. There's actually a checklist as well on our website, which we can include in this submission. But these right here, these are basically the layers of defense in depth. And a main thing when you start looking at this, of all these things that pull out where we run across problems is always accountability. So that's right in the pitfalls of getting those stakeholders involved. But how do you identify those stakeholders? And just as a side note here, a little story. So back from 1997, there's a U.S. military exercise dubbed Eligible Receiver. So it was back in the early days of the internet, and people were like, oh, this .com thing might take off. I think I should invest all my money in Yahoo or one of those other Ask Jeeves maybe. So they're getting excited about this internet thing, and all these systems are interconnected, which is wonderful. But they're thinking, could there be malicious actors that could possibly do something bad with this? It was always the internet, and the way everything was connected there wasn't really looked at from a malicious perspective in detail yet. So the U.S. military involved the NSA and created this program called Eligible Receiver. So they set up some rules of engagement, and they said, well, okay, NSA, we want you to test the defense of Naval Command in Hawaii. And you're not allowed to do any reconnaissance, and you can only use tools you can find on the internet. So over the next few months, the NSA went to work, and they didn't really break anything. They just left little Easter eggs all over the system in Hawaii. And when they finished this up, the military was kind of embarrassed. They said, well, there's no way you got in all that stuff. And really, they got in pretty easily. And to prove a fact, so they kind of took those and, filed it away somewhere. And just later that year, kind of in early 1998, there was some teenagers in high school that decided that they were going to do the same thing, that they just figured out they should found on the internet and hacked into a bunch of military bases. And so the military got a little concerned. And so they dubbed it Operation Solar Sunrise. And Deputy Defense Secretary John Hammer basically got everyone together in a room, all these joint forces, and goes, okay, guys, what's happening here? How do we put this together? Who's responsible for looking after the security and the defense of our cyber systems? And it was like crickets in the room because no one stood up. There was no response. And basically they realized no one was in charge of the cyber defense of the US military. So they created immediately a joint task force called Computer Network Defense, which over the years it's progressed, but that was kind of a great lesson on accountability. And when you have all these systems connected, everyone can just plug and connect and do things, but who's really accountable for making sure that these systems are safely connected? And just back this slide for a second here. The maze, basically defense in depth. If you think of it as a maze there, your maze is all your layers of defense, and that nice little computer in the middle is your PLC, your SCADA workstation, something like that. So this top image, that's, you got maybe one layer of defense there, maybe. So they have to, well, some lines here, they can just they got to do like one turn to get into the middle there. So you're kind of like, you got a candy coating with a chocolate center there. Once you're inside, you can just go to town and see what that computer can do. Where we want to get to is the bottom one. We got this nice maze here. We got all different paths. We got multiple layers. We got redundancies. We got different systems in place. So, if someone makes it to the first corner and they're like, oh, hit the end of the maze, I'll give up. I'll try something else. So there's a lot more redundancies involved. Physical security. So Bill likes this one because I think this is the one I think this is the one you see all the time running around the different facilities.
I do, actually. Actually, we just thought about this. Excuse me. Your two stories kind of reminded me of a movie out in the 80s about, it's called War Games. This guy hacks into the US government and wants to release some missiles. So who knew? So anyways, but yeah, you don't necessarily always get hacked in through the internet. You can get hacked in from just a guy walking into your SCADA room. Is your SCADA room, is the door open? Is it unlocked? Is it open to salesmen walking by, janitors, even curious coworkers? Are they where they can just come into your room and just say, hey, this looks cool. do you lock your doors in your car and your house when you come to work? I mean, those are your possessions. We're thinking about the community's possessions when you have a water and a wastewater facility to protect. I mean, these are the gateways into the community's assets, and limiting these can prevent a lot of unnecessary responses, particularly in the wee hours in the morning, because they think, oh, I'm going to hack into Canada and BC, I'm 12 hours away. They're going to be asleep, so they're never going to notice. So, just little things that you can do, like starting today, you can just go buy a lock. I mean, a door lock is like $50, and you can hand out keys to the necessary people. Keys are like $2 a pop, so you're barely hitting like 60, $70 worth of initial investment, even if you don't have an extra doorknob kicking around. And other things you can do is like passwords for operators. You know who's supposed to be in there. You can just talk with your whoever looks after your SCADA. They can hook them up with certain passwords within minutes. So it's just something simple you can do physically to prevent someone from just walking in and playing.
Yeah, so very true. And I mean, you can have the fanciest firewall equipment and network server room and everything set up there, but I mean, if someone can just walk in and push the power button, well, there's a denial of service right there. They don't even have to do much. So, or plug a vacuum cleaner into the same outlet as your computer. Yeah, that'll work too. So number 2 here, we're kind of moving down our defense in depth. We've got some policies and procedures. Now, I find this slide, I kind of layered this slide here a little bit. It's kind of like a recursive slide, maybe a little inception going on here, because the established policy and awareness organization section right there, that's actually the policies and procedures I'm talking about, but I got the slide here overall. So you got the overview with the slide in the slide. So that's how this one fits together. And I just wanted to show how a CSMS, or a cybersecurity management system, involves these components right from the high level. So when you're getting your stakeholders involved, they're obviously going to be concerned, how are we going to implement this? How are we going to make sure that these things keep happening, and update our policies and procedures? And this example here of this flow chart, you got arrows going lots of different directions, because it's a continuous process. Even though, you sit down today and you say, we need a cybersecurity management system. We got no locks in the doors, so, anyone can walk in there, and we got all these other problems. Let's start a CSMS and figure out what we can do. So you got to go into your high level assessment and then into your detailed assessment. So you kind of figure out what you have, you do your gap analysis, and you kind of isolate and enumerate all these components. And that's when you move into policies and procedures as a component of defense in depth. So all these things kind of fit together, because then once you go into maintenance and you're running your plant and you're like, this looks great, except for this one policy. Let's do a little tweaking on this one, because we need to refine it. So then you can go back and you can say, well, let's look at this together as a group, make sure everyone understands why we're going to update this policy, and then push it out for a policy again. So it's a continual improvement. Sometimes you replace components. You buy these new VFDs, and 2 or 3 years later, you need to put a different manufacturer in, or you need to put something else in. So little things change here and there. And that determines the level of reassessment and all different things you need to do to evaluate how your policies and procedures are affected. Zones and conduits. Here's another one that, Bill, I've split this one up here just so we can combine. So if your notes for slide numbers, I think I was just playing tricks on you here to keep you on your toes.
Fair enough. Just a regular day.
So what we got here is zones and conduits. We got a flat network. So I'm just going to jump through these few slides and I'll come back to it. So basically we have a flat network here, all these devices, and this is very common. I mean, this starts in a small plant. Maybe you have one PLC, you got an HMI, I don't know, photocopier, SCADA machine, something like that. Nice and easy to set up. You buy some components, you set up some firewalls. It's working just fine. The problem is scalability. You start scaling this thing out, and by the time you take, you started with one PLC, maybe you had 2, but then when you get out to 30 or 40 or 50 even, it's a lot of devices to manage in a flat network. And you run into this problem. So say you got this photocopier on this network, which has an MCC and a PLC on it. And this malicious threat actor here, this guy at the bottom, he's decided to target this copier because he's found a vulnerability on Google. So this threat actor is gonna get in there. And once he gets in, there's nothing stopping him from looking around the network. He can connect to an MCC, he can connect to a phone, he can get everything. There's nothing stopping him. The firewall is out here. So there's nothing monitoring anything going on in there. So very difficult to protect. Jumping into our proposed zone and conduit model, we basically have all these different zones set up. So, and in this example here, I expanded it out to a pretty large size, just to see. I mean, these aren't prescriptive zones. These are just, we want to look at what is in each zone. And in this case, we got enterprise zones, so IT can take care of that. We don't want office printers messing up our SCADA system. And then we have a conduit that basically connects the firewall in the enterprise side to a DMZ. So let's put our SCADA server there. You can connect from the internet here down through your conduit connecting IT into your SCADA server. And that SCADA server then has another firewall and a conduit that connect down to your engineering workstation. So it balances out how this connectivity, who's managing rules, and really helps with accountability, because now you clearly say, well, you got an office phone, an office printer, IT, that's your accountability. Oh, you got a SCADA server. Okay, well, who's looking after the SCADA zone? Who's looking after the engineering zone? And when you get down to the plant zone, you got your PLCs and you got conduits going into your IO devices. So now clearly we have, PLCs isolated from our office printer up top here. And we have multiple levels of redundancy and firewalls that someone has to get through in order to cause any problems. So now here's this threat actor again. He's decided that the SCADA server is running Windows 7 and it has a remote desktop protocol enabled that he found on Shodan.io, as per the demonstration yesterday from Rob and Darren. So now he's right here in the SCADA server. He's put his malicious software on here and he's going to scan the network, and well, he sees a firewall. He's like, oh, well, okay, can't really do anything now. So chances are he's going to move on. But if he doesn't, he has to work through this firewall. He has to get down to this firewall. He has to get down to this firewall before he can even get to your PLC and your more complicated systems. So there's a lot of layers of redundancy in here, and a lot of different systems that are gonna kind of get in his way and twists and turns in the maze. So Bill, I know you got some comments on this one.
Yeah, actually, I just recently had a similar incident there where I look after this rural community, about 24 homes, pretty elaborate water plant. One thing they are missing, excuse me, is some cybersecurity. But they have a neighboring water system that has their water line that goes right beside their water plant. And so they asked us, can we just put in our flow meter there and pressure gauges so we can kind of monitor it? We'll come in every once in a while and just download the memory stick and off we go. But now they want to upgrade that to, well, I don't really want to get out of bed to read the flow meter, so why don't I just do it remotely? Because that seems to be where technology is going. So kind of looked at it and it's like, well, seeing that my community does not have much cybersecurity, kind of, suggest that this other water system try and figure out a different way, because if they can get in and download their stuff and they're bored, or someone hacks into them because they're the lowest fruit, well, guess what the next fruit is? It's us. And next thing you know, now we got problems. We don't want problems. They like things, they're nice and consistent, and they're happy. So just some real life stuff that actually does happen with this. I mean, it seems very confusing, but once you break it down into these little tubes, you can figure it out. And it's like, yeah, okay, no, this won't work, but this will. So does it work for your system? Well, that's what the analysis will do. So
thank you, Bill. so yeah, all great points. And again, these are just presented in the slides here for examples of different network configurations. Everything's going to be set up a little differently. And maybe you have different connections between zones to other zones in some other plants. But the important thing, I mean, going back to just about everything here, is documentation. So you can't improve anything if you don't know what you're looking at. You gotta break it into those little pieces. You gotta look at it, and before you can reassemble it into the whole picture. So moving on to number 4. This is malware prevention. I think everyone's familiar with this. Anyone running Windows or any sort of computer, really, and for anyone running a Mac, you're not immune to viruses unless it's it's some clever marketing there. Really, it goes all the way back to basically targets of opportunity. People, hackers are lazy. If they're going to write code, they're going to spend their time writing code. They're going to target the largest group. They're going to target the group that can make them the most money, or it can cause the most impact, or sometimes just try it to get their name out there. They just want to become popular. Well, unfortunately, that's less and less these days, and more just ransomware. But you got to figure out the risk of getting risk of an impact of malware on your systems. Whether it's coming from someone internal, like finding USB key in the parking lot, to tilt the hat to Stuxnet or Stuxnet as to that vector there, but could be, well, external but internal. So it's kind of a combination. But yeah, so how did the malware get in the system? You have to work closely with IT. Maybe you have phishing policies in place on emails to, don't click on random links, or know that the link is coming from someone. Don't look at your email on the engineering PC. You're in the wrong zone. Go over and use something in the enterprise zone that's being monitored separately that has different malware prevention on it. Antivirus systems are a component of host malware detection or prevention. You can go all the way up to, say for external sources, if you do have someone poking around your network, you can move into some network level detection, which we're going to get into in a little second here. But basically, when we look at operational systems, it's very easy to, there's lots of different products you can buy for PCs. Say you go to Windows and, you got different antivirus providers. When you move into the control systems, everything's custom. You got custom solutions. You might have the only wastewater plant that looks like that wastewater plant. You have different IO counts in your PLCs. It's talking to different things. It's different configurations. So there's a lot of one-of-a-kind solutions, and it's very difficult to create a cookie-cutter solution that can protect that without a custom solution to go with your custom water plant. So that's a huge difference between OT and IT systems when you're trying to protect them, particularly with malware. Protect them against malware, that is. Defense in-depth access controls. So number 5 here. So Bill alluded a little bit to this in his discussion on another water system connecting to another water system, but let's look at it from the individual perspective here. So authentication, authorization, and auditing. Authentication is figuring out who you are. So you have some way. You got a username, you got a password, maybe. You got some way to authenticate who you are and the system you're connecting to. So the system is able to authenticate who you are. Authorization is when you move into the next phase. So the system's identified who you are, but do you have permission to change the status of this pump? Do you have permission to overwrite the reservoir level settings on this particular interface? So that's the next level. And then auditing is logs. We can get it ties into the next layer of defense in depth, but you got to audit it somehow. You got logs all over the place. What are you going to do with them? I think Bill here, you got a bunch of comments on this one. I know because we discussed this one in depth quite frequently as to multiple ways that you can do a few of those layers.
Yeah, there was. You can do what we mentioned before with the physical end of things. Adding locks and such to your SCADA room doors and stuff. When you get your passwords in, this day and age, we have a password for everything. So, you can have something simple as just a password manager with what's called a two-factor authentication. that is where something so you have your password, and then the next step there is something that you are. So, your fingerprint, your optical, a fob, right? So that's just a double check to say, you know what, that's what you are. It's we've had I've come into a lot of different situations where you would really need this. I'm aware of a place where we're standby for a municipality where anybody can sign up for them, whether you're in the parks department, engineering department, wherever, and your job is just to take the phone call, from a resident or whoever, or the phone from your SCADA saying, I've got a problem. Now with them, the usual procedure is to just phone an operator. You don't have to figure out what the alarm is, figure out what he said. You got an alarm, just phone someone, phone an operator and get them to deal with it. But I've had people where there's like, well, how hard can it be? All he does is push buttons. Well, so he winds up playing with it, doesn't phone anybody out. Next thing you know, shuts the plant down. Oops. Well, he wants to cover his butt, so he deletes his phone call. And then when you come in the morning, it's like, oh, why is the plant offline? Well, he says, well, I never got a call. Well, like Sean said, with the auditing portion, there's logs. Any operator can go into their log in their SCADA system. It's like, oh, yeah, it did call out. So, you got to be careful with those things and not just allow anybody to have access to it. You want to make sure the right people have the access. Otherwise, you're going to go crazy dealing with these alarms. And then when you get, are they fake or are they not, or real alarms? If they're fake all the time, then when it does come to a real alarm, you say, oh no, happens all the time. Not worried about it. I'm going back to bed. Next thing you know, the city's flooded, or the city doesn't have any water to fight fires, or you've got an environmental spill because it's all down the river. So you just really have to be mindful of who has access to your system.
That's well said, Bill. Yeah, especially, if you have the same password, share a username or login, it's going to be impossible. Impossible to set up any sort of authorization level, because if everyone uses the same login and everyone has full access in that login, well,
why have it?
Why have it? Might as well just take the lock off the door too. Moving into monitoring and detection. So number 6. So for anyone keeping track here, we got 7 defense in depth to cover in this. So this is number 6. Monitoring and detection. So Bill mentioned auditing. So you got lots of logs. Windows, even if you're not doing anything with it, it logs everything. It probably sends half the stuff to Microsoft too. So, but anyway, besides the point, that's a whole other discussion. So when you have all these log files and you're collecting them, you're keeping them, you got your firewall logs, you got computer logs, you got PLC logs. A lot of modern PLCs now are logging all their data connections, stuff they're connecting to, different requested changes. What are you doing with the info? Now that you're monitoring it, you need to do some detection. And when you move into detection, now again, we're at step 6 of defense in depth. And as a side note, this is getting more and more advanced. As you see, the maze is almost at the computer at the top there. So it's quite advanced, and there's not very many facilities that have effectively implemented this yet. This is a proposed solution. This is a very moving up the ladder in levels of redundancy and protection here. However, you can look at the system, you can analyze your risk tolerance and decide, yeah, we want minimal detection. We want to know, for example, whenever someone turns this pump on and off, we want to get an email or we want to get something. So that's a very simple level and a simple example of detection. But all this stuff's being logged. You got to do something with it. You got to tweak your alarm settings. You got to eliminate the false alarms. You got to make sure the detection is set up correctly. And there's lots of innovative technologies being used now. They got AI involved in a lot of network detection, network-based detection. It's running different filters. The one thing you do have to be careful of, though, is if you look at IT, they do have network detection as well. and a lot of monitoring systems. However, they don't really play nice with with operational systems. And if you run any of their systems without the right filters, it can cause some serious problems and bottlenecks on the network. Just, the reason behind that being that if you're running a 20-year-old Ethernet network, you're probably at 10 megabit, maybe 100 megabit if you got the fancy one. But IT networks now, gigabit is kind of the entry point. You're talking 10 gigabit, backbones, if not higher, for a lot of IT systems. So they have lots of capability for running detection and monitoring systems real time that you probably don't want to do over some minimal cell connection that's connected to a bunch of serial devices. So just be careful when you do implement detection that you're using the right system. And patching. So there's number 7. So you have this fancy, shiny new controller installed in your plant, but is it up to date? Does it have the latest security patches? They're finding vulnerabilities all the time. You need a way set up that you can patch this system and update it without taking your plant down. And if you do have to take it down, make sure you have a backup plan, make sure you have disaster recovery in place, and you have the proper operators on hand to get the thing running, or proper whoever's involved in getting the plant running. Maybe you have to notify a fire department because you're going to be shutting off a water supply or going on minimal reserves. But make sure that you have a plan in place that if the patching fails, if you're trying to do it, that you can continue running and get the plant back operational. So that's patching to make sure that you have the latest security updates and that all your systems are running. So Bill, I just noticed we're coming close to our time here. So I know we're right at the end. So that's got about 2 slides left here. So maybe if we kind of rehash a little bit of the lessons learned and things you can do today just to get started into this.
Yeah, it's like it's been mentioned before, just you can do very simple things, locks, keys, passwords, don't use the default password that your IT guy gives you for your email. I mean, yeah, it's easy to remember, but if anything, anybody can figure your password out and get into your computer and have a lot of fun with you at your expense. So just simple things, audit your stuff, know who's supposed to be in, who's not supposed to be in, and just work with your IT person and whoever's looking after your SCADA.
Okay, thank you very much, guys. We got one question here. I'd like to run past you. We're running out of time. Sorry for interrupting.
Yeah, no, we're right in the right slide there. There we go.
Okay, we have a number of lifts. The question is from Colin. It's a long one. We have a number of lift stations on SCADA. Have recently gone through numerous hardware changes with the company and internet upgrades, etc. Always a pain to get it right. Obviously, tech changes every day. What is the maximum time you would recommend to perform an upgrade, simply from a firewall status? It has cost and has an amazing amount trying to deal with issues like once in a while you just have to unplug it to clear the cache. So many callouts when there was no operational control available. Boots on the ground still have to run. So I think the question is how often do you check that firewall?
There's a lot of things I think Bill and I could jump on that question.
Yeah.
But I'm just gonna we'll get to that one. But I think just the having to unplug to reset something.
Yeah.
That's kind of indicative of maybe some other problems or some other either configuration issues or maybe something going on there that needs to be investigated on the network side with some part of an assessment. But there's no set number of days or months or years in between when you're supposed to be updating, whether it's patching or whether it's firewall rules updates. Firewalls they only work as well as the rules that are programmed in them, but you need to develop, figure out what your risk tolerance is. Are you willing to accept this plant going down here, if you update it every year? Or are you not willing to have these plants go down and maybe you need to look at them every month and do a quick refresh and then take a look at the logs from that firewall or take a look at the logs from whatever network traffic system that you have in place or could get in place to see why this is happening. Bill, maybe you have anything to add?
Yeah, just what's the frequency of someone dialing into your system to see how vulnerable you are? You know, just have a look at that, and if it's, you know, you're getting once a week or a couple times a week, then maybe you got to change it every couple of days, unfortunately, or can you do it every month? You know, just as a whatever checklist you have for the person looking after it.
Okay.
Yeah, so
I've got another question here. I think it's a quicker one for you. Should an IT person be doing your maintenance on your SCADA systems? You've got two levels there. I mean,
did this come from an IT person? Yes and no.
Okay.
Bill, I know Bill's got one loaded up for this one.
Okay, take it, Bill.
Well, from my perspective, I would say no. Usually the IT person looks after the firewalls, the building the computers, like the enterprise part of the system. They don't go out and they don't know what the, you know, what the 4 to 20 is on your valve, or how the pump runs, and, you know, that configuration. That's someone that comes out and I'll just say more of the electrical, like an instrumentation person, electrical person, that I would sort of trust on that end of things. But you still need them to integrate it into your mainframe portion of the computer.
Yep. So working in parallel, you know, IT person, you know, with all the components Bill mentioned, with the right training, you know, and with the right awareness of the different priorities, you know, could do the system. But also, you know, when you look at it, you know, there's only so many hours in the day. If you're trying to keep your IT systems online, do you have time to fit in the OT as well? And that's where, you know, you kind of look at that, and, you know, you have to remind the IT people they do need to get out of the car at the wastewater plant and go into the facility. So.
Okay, well, I appreciate the presentation. Just a quick note, I was in a control room not too long ago, and they had two printers side by side, and I was curious about it. Nobody really was able to answer the question, but I'm pretty sure I got it now. One was for the email printing, and the other one was from printing from the control system. They had a physical separation there. Anyways, EOCP wants to thank you for your presentation, boy, and they'll send you a small gift thank you in the mail, and that wraps up our time for you guys today. Again, thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Yes, thank you very much.